Mitchell Stankovic Associates and the Underground Ideas into Action presents The Underground Chats, authentic conversations with credit union thought leaders. Today's chat, Build Innovation into Our DNA, with Maurice Smith, President and CEO of Local Government Federal Credit Union.
So Maurice, it's so good to see you. How are you, your family, your credit union family?
Well, thank you, Susan. It's a delight to see you as well. We are doing well, given the circumstances of going through a pandemic. And my family's doing well. We're following all the social protocols, and my wife insists I behave and wash my hands and do all the things I'm supposed to do. And our credit union staff, I think, is doing well. And what seems odd to me is this is beginning to feel normal to me. So, we're coming up on a year anniversary of dealing with this. And I'm, I struggle to think about, well, what did life feel like before this? But under the circumstances, given the illnesses and hospitalizations and deaths that we have experienced in this pandemic, we are doing very well. We have no complaints. I hope you and your family are well.
Thank you very much. Yes, we are. And I agree with you. This new way of living, it's not just business or home. It's a new way of living. I think that we think twice about where we're going to go and, grocery stores, and we make the trips in a more mindful way. So that kind of leads me to the whole idea of, how did you survive 2020? A credit union perspective, from your member perspective?
Susan, our credit union did well. And so we will reflect probably record bottom line. We grew like crazy. You have stimulus checks and coming into households. Not every household needed to spend that cash they received. So we saw record growth in terms of assets. Membership was a little slower because it was hard to get out and talk to prospective members. But financially, we did well. We hit most of our metrics and the financial objectives the board gives the management team each year. But that's just part of the story. That just talks about corporately how we've done as a credit union. But because we are credit unions, there's this aggregate theory that we sort of subscribe to. We are our members, and our members have not all done as well. And so we're trying to remain mindful that a lot of our members in communities they have their struggles, and they're still trying to recover from this episode. And so we are looking for ways to provide some help.
Are you finding, I talked to another CEO yesterday, and one of the things that he mentioned to me was the fact that some members are doing well, and then others are in food lines right now, and that there is that kind of disparity. Are you finding that in your area as well?
We're finding that as well, Susan. It would be misplaced for us who serve city and county employees throughout North Carolina to believe that all of our members are feeling this pandemic the same way. So we have city and county employees who haven't lost their jobs. It's government jobs. They're essential workers. They continue to go in every day. But we also have members who are not connected directly to local government, maybe family members, maybe persons who have retired, maybe, school age, students, and they themselves have, they're facing these challenges as well. So we're trying to be very mindful of the various needs that our members have and making sure that we are addressing those.
When we were in DC, you talked about a culture of caring and a culture of, and it stayed with me, because I think that there's a basic premise with you as a leader that you all come together and you care about each other, and you make sure that that's a prevalent part of how you interact with members and with each other. How has that helped you through this transition?
I think it has grounded us. We talked about this notion that as a credit union, as a cooperative family, as a community, that we should care about one another. I mean, that's just basic decency. But it also presents a competitive advantage for us as a co-op to share with our membership that just peddling products isn't what we are about. That their concerns, their wherewithal, and their livelihoods, if you will, is part of our responsibility as a co-op. And so one of the things we try to express among our team here and among our board and the membership is that it is insufficient for the credit union as a corporation to do well in a season and the membership suffers. So, perhaps I'm a bleeding heart, Susan. I don't know. I tend to take these things personal. And so we put this chip on our own shoulders that if our members in the community are struggling, then we dare believe it is our responsibility as their credit union to do something about it. So I'm held responsible not just for the bottom line, return on assets and net worth and the usual metrics for the credit union's performance. I also hold it as a personal responsibility that we ensure that our members in their communities are doing well. And that requires have a listening ear to what their concerns are, and also being sensitive enough to react to the responses that we receive from our members.
I appreciate that commentary, and obviously we have a lot going on in our country right now. And one of the comments that was made yesterday with some of the things that took place in DC was the idea that we all seem to go back to normal. And there's a part of us that wants to go back to normal because obviously it's important that we show the world that we'll continue to move forward with our democracy and do the things we need to do. But on the other hand, this isn't normal, what's taking place. And I think we saw that with Black Lives Matter. We saw that throughout the year, that events have happened that have driven people to react or to have marches. But I believe that we are at a tipping point, and the fact that you remain steadfast in your mission, to me, is going to be critical from an industry perspective. How do you reconcile the need to go back to some sense of normalcy, but also recognize that we really have to move forward?
That's a really good question. So let's talk a little bit about the historical perspective, perhaps to help some here. So, Susan, this is my 41st year in credit unions. Started as a naive, young, skinny loan officer back in 1979 with these notions that we could change the world. And so in my career of over 4 decades, I have seen 5 recessions. I've seen just about everything the economy can throw somebody. I've seen rising rate environments. I've seen flat yield curves. I've seen inverted yield curves. I've seen, imbalance in trade. I've seen prime rate as high as 18%, unemployment going up and down. And we've seen all these various economies. And what that has convinced me is that we have seen this before. Not necessarily, we haven't seen the pandemic. This is my first pandemic. But we have seen bad times before. And these times cycle around. So sooner or later, this recession will end. We'll go into an expansionary or recovery period. And then jobs will grow again and businesses will flourish. But it should not be lost on us that another downturn is going to eventually arrive. It is up to us as credit unions to do something about it. We should be completely dissatisfied that our members and our community are struggling during this period. We knew several years ago it was going to be another recession eventually. Didn't know what was going to drive it. We know another one's coming. So we really need to roll up our sleeves and get busy, preparing for the next downturn. I'd like to take a look at history and how things have led us to where we are today. But my hope and aspiration is driven by our members will continue to need us in the future. We need to be effective in making sure we have the right answers for them.
I like to look at things in a mindful way. I'm very much about the human spirit and, caring at that level. I'm also very much about doing the right thing has to also be good business. And as we go into these areas, this is a little off script, but I'm curious. One of the things that we've seen with the virtual transition this year is that everybody, in some cases, scrambled, in other cases, were prepared to be able to respond to what's taking place in the market and the fact that we had to go virtual. In your case, you had the forethought and you were already setting up a separate entity to be all virtual. I didn't mention it before, but I'm thinking it's so relevant that that's been a few years ago. And you really, I think, strategically look to the future. Will you tell us about that?
Absolutely. So I have 2 jobs, 1 paycheck for 2 jobs. And so one is the CEO of local government federal credit union, which local government includes 545 municipalities, 100 counties, 1,400 fire departments, and a whole, variety of other local government structures. About 3 years ago, we chartered a new credit union, a de novo credit union from the ground up called Civic Federal Credit Union. And Civic serves the same field of membership that LGFCU serves. We have overlapping board members, the same management team, but some different architectural structures in terms of chords and services behind the scene. We wanted to give our members a choice. So if you want to go to a brick and mortar, location to conduct business, such as we have with LGFCU and our partnership with our good friends at State Employees Credit Union, or you want to have a mobile, online, virtual experience, then you have a choice of the institutions that you get to use for services. We realized that not everybody who was eligible to join LGFCU was a member. So some of our potential members were going someplace else for services, and we were paying attention to where they were going, and they were going to some of the platforms that gave them more online capability. And so we thought, why chase the members away? Why not offer them the services that they want? But also the philosophical side of doing this is that we can't have a branch in every single community in the state. It's just not feasible. So there are pockets of the state where financial services are not as accessible to these potential members as it could be. And because Civic lives online, if you have a mobile phone and access to the internet, then there's some equilibrium in the services that we offer you, as well as the services we offer into some of our metropolitan areas. So we are still underway. Civic is growing and we are reaching out to new members, but we are pleased to be able to offer them a choice of how they want to do business.
It's positioning the organization for what we quickly saw in 2020, this need for virtual. And I think that what I'm excited about in looking at the full composite of what you're doing as an organization is that on a technology level, you've made a commitment that will differentiate. And I do believe that the next generation, and now we're seeing, in my case, my grandchildren interacting with their, going to school virtually. I've got a kindergartner that's, out there impatient with grandma, and I'm watching him and I'm thinking to myself, there's no way that they're going to want to go to any kind of slower or less seamless experience.
Absolutely. The experience of dealing with a financial institution isn't defined, we believe, by your experiences with other financial institutions. Your experience with LGFCU and or Civic is going to be compared to your experience with Amazon or with Netflix or any other places that you do business. That's how we're going to be measured. And so we feel like we need to give members choices, and they have to be proactive choices, and they have to be really good in user experience for each and every one of them. We still have our work to do. I don't want to give you the impression that we've figured it all out, but we're on this journey, and we're looking forward to what we can do for our communities here.
Well, I think that obviously it's going to be a work in progress, but as we make, we kind of set our journey for the future, I think it's important that we don't go back and that we continue to look at the way behaviors have shifted and what financial well-being will be in the future for people with this disparity, with the racial divide, with the divide within our country. I mean, we have significant differences as a consumer, as a country. So from an industry perspective, how do you see that bridging happen? You're doing it in a multitude of ways within your field of membership. How is that going to play out with the industry?
So, Susan, I have an opinion about that and how we as an industry can keep pace with the needs of the community. So something, you and I may have talked about this before. So something interesting is going to happen later this year. If my calculation is correct, then we're going to fall under 5,000 credit unions in the United States later on this year. The last time we had less than 5,000 credit unions in this country was 1943. I've heard the argument that credit unions are getting bigger and larger and more asset size and more memberships, and the total number of memberships nationwide is going up. But something feels different to me. So there are a number of initiatives going on around the country that I'm aware of aspiring subscribers who would like to form their own credit unions for various purposes. And these are people who have a social mandate, or they have aspirations of doing good things in the community. And I said, well, there are other financial choices that you have in your community. Why form your own credit union? And it isn't because they can't find the financial products they want. They want to have a seat at the table to participate in the governance of their own financial institution, to make economic decisions for their community and feel like their voices are heard. Sounds like part of the cooperative principles of who we are and what we stand for. So then when you have consolidation occurring in the credit union business, as we are seeing, in the hometown community financial institution, credit unions are disappearing and consolidating into the big corporate type credit unions where the headquarters is someplace way out of town. And the local citizens, while they may continue to have services available to them, they don't really feel the proximity to the decision-making that takes place for their community. So when I talk to folks in the community, they feel like, I want that decision-making to remain in my community so that I can feel like I have a valuable choice. What I would hope to see in the credit union movement in the times to come is somehow, I suppose, scaling the democracy of credit union governance down to the lower level. And I've got thoughts and ideas on how that can possibly be done, but somehow allowing your institution to get large enough to be sustainable and scalable, but at the same time, not losing that local voice. So that people feel like this is my credit union. I'm not just one of a large number of members of the institution. By golly, this is my hometown institution, and it really stands and means something. So that I'd like to see us continue to hold on to, and maybe I would argue return to for the credit union movement. I think there is a competitive advantage in doing so, but I believe the communities are asking for this.
When you think of the original purpose around common bond, right? And the idea that we had affinity to each other,
Exactly.
Whatever that collective unit looked like, there was this affinity and that sense of responsibility to give back. I think we're seeing a grassroots understanding of that, and how we communicate it, I think, is going to be critical, because we have to have our ability, as you said, on a virtual level and from a transaction standpoint, but that feeling of belonging, that feeling of this matters to me. We talked to Gary Perez about some of the new efforts there in looking at a new credit union. I think we're going to see more grassroots efforts, and I see some of our business partners, some of our core processors being willing to support the development of this as well. So that gives me hope. It'll be interesting. Yeah, thank you very much for that. It'll be interesting to see from a government perspective how our regulators and what they'll see in terms of the requirements of those, to give them a chance. Because the startup idea, for many years, I've thought of a holding company where my responsibility at the holding company is to feed local democracy, and be able to give the back office streamlined, but give the authority out to the local offices. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. I appreciate that, Maurice. So what are your goals for 2021? I mean, what's top priority for you?
We have a few things on our mind, as you might imagine. And one of those, I want to harken back to your previous comment about a holding company. And one of those is actually doing exactly that. So we have two credit unions and we have a couple of QSOs within what we're calling a member enterprise. Now, credit unions cannot be under a holding company. They're owned by their members. We get that. But we believe there is great value at looking at a holding company type model to be able to serve the membership. And here's what I mean by this. So any organization, any institution that gets its license from government to operate, such as we do as credit unions, we go to NCUA or we go to a state authority and they give us a charter. And that charter says you may operate a credit union and here are the powers that you may have. You have to operate within these regulatory structures. I have no problem with that. The only challenge is that our members' needs often sit outside that structure. So our members come knock on the door and say, Maurice, I have this need. And I say, yeah, but my charter doesn't allow me to address that need. So I have two choices. One, I can just say, ignore you. I'm not going to address that need because my charter won't let me touch that. Or we can find an innovative way to be able to address your need. Now, if we did have holding companies, I would just bolt on to other subsidiaries that would allow us to be able to address those needs in the various industries around which you have concerns. We're told as a credit union we can't have holding companies. Or can we? So what we are doing is we're stitching together various companies, businesses, if you will, to address the needs of our membership. And we found a way to create an alliance among them. They don't sit under an umbrella holding company per se, but they are stitched close together enough to serve the common needs and interests of the membership. It's not satisfying to us to tell our members, I know you have a need and I know it's legitimate. Go someplace else to get service. If we believe that we have the wherewithal, the scale, and the ability to do something about it. I can't think of a better model to address the social and the financial needs of the community than the co-op model, in which you have an ownership and a governance and participatory role in. We want our members to take those values and apply it to every other aspect of their life. And if the other people in their lives, the other companies, the other vendors, the other places where they get to do business don't live up to the ideals that we have as credit unions, we're thinking, why would you settle for anything less? So we believe the holding company kind of model might be a way that we can scale services. The second thing is, and I won't run you down this rabbit hole with me, Susan, but I'm on this fantasy that we can actually eliminate poverty. Now, don't laugh. I've had enough people laugh at me about that already. But we want to do something that's evolutionary, revolutionary, sustainable, and scalable about helping to mitigate intergenerational stubborn poverty that grips households and communities. And we're chipping away at it. And it's a complex equation with so many different factors involved in it. We probably can't do it all by ourselves, but by golly, it just feels like we should do more than just sit here and look at the problem and do nothing about it. So we've got some ideas, we're working on some things, we have some theories, we're investing some money, but we want to do something about poverty, and that's a big initiative for us this year.
Well, I'll tell you what, I raised my hand to stand up, volunteer with you. I don't laugh. I think that if we don't have big dreams and we don't start to tackle this in incremental ways, we've got real issues ahead. I saw some data just this week about 17% of the population right now living in poverty. And when you think about those numbers and you think that it even gets greater depending on the source that you're looking at, we're not talking about, okay, I didn't get a paycheck. We're talking about people that can't afford to live in their homes or they're on the street. So I know that I start every day with a sense of gratitude. And then, like you, I roll up my sleeves and say, okay, what is it that I'm trying to do? And I don't know about you, but there are times that people will say, why? Why do you always wake up with that feeling? And my response is, I don't know. I mean, it's a driving factor of who I am as a human being. But when I see credit unions in a position to work with everyday people in all walks of life, we know that we have people that formed credit unions so they could help their brothers and sisters, right, in every part of the world. And so when we know that, as you know, I'm on the Worldwide Foundation Board, and we know that we touch about 1 billion lives worldwide, that's a big deal. So as a credit union movement, I think we scale back. We need to think bigger. So Maurice, that's very inspiring. I would love to know more about that journey and for us to do an update, because that's something that we could share out to our industry. And I'm sure you will be anyway with your involvement in the industry. Congratulations. Yeah, that's fabulous. Okay, so I mentioned to you, you mentioned your time in your career. So you remember the Tom Peters and the blinding flash of the obvious. And I was reading some articles about the impact of 2020, and all of them were things like, okay, turn a hotel room, instead of them being places where you and I can stay right now, let's put them as offices so people can look at the ocean and go to work every day. So to me, there's these moments that people are going through right now that are re-engineering, inventing the way that we do business and the way that we live. So I was just curious, like, what are some blinding flashes of the obvious that you learned that you're going to want to implement?
That's a really good question. Things that just seem obvious to us. So one of the things that we're trying to instill in the DNA of our organization is a propensity for innovation, and to look at the services that we offer, the product mix, how we offer it, the manner in which we do that, and try to be more innovative with it. And by innovation, I mean, really address the underlying needs of the membership. So it occurred to us in doing our innovation exercises that we have undergone that we really need to focus on not just the express needs of the membership, but actually how they actually live their lives. So one of the revelations that we uncovered is members have workarounds. And so I might, for instance, construct my budget home in a quicken spreadsheet, have all the formalities and the accounts and project my income and do all that sort of thing. Well, another household may have a completely different way of managing their money that is effective. It just may not have the same formality that I have, but they have these workarounds in their life on how do I address financial fragility for my family? How do I, figure out how to make ends meet when my next paycheck isn't quite so certain? Or how do I address now educating my children at home when that disrupts my work schedule as well? And so our members have ways of dealing with these financial challenges every day. What we want to know is how can we take the workaround? Our members have already done the innovation. How do we take those workarounds, scale it, and then somehow weaponize it, if you will, to the extent that is going to propel our membership into a better place? The obvious for us is already there. Maybe it's not in the conference rooms around the credit union. Maybe it's not in the boardroom, but our members have figured out some things. And so we now want to be really embedded into the minds and the habits and the dining room tables of our members. Explain to us what are you doing today? And then explain to us what you need. And we want to gather all this insight and intel and bring it back to the credit union and say, how can we now somehow commoditize this to take it back out to the membership? So we're on this journey to sort of figure that out. And we've made some interesting discoveries along the way, but we don't believe that we've discovered all we need to have. So we're excited about what's going to happen next. We do not want our members to believe that the whole role of the credit union is to serve as a utility peddling financial products, and that's all. Our responsibility runs way deeper than that. And we're going to continue to have these intimate conversations with the membership, so we know that we are positioning ourselves in the right place.
I really like the idea of understanding workarounds, because when you think about your life, whether it's a paradigm shift or it's a detour when you're driving, or it's, a disruptor every single day right now, we have to figure out an alternative path. And that means nimbleness. It means that you're going to be proactive as well as reactive. And then one of the things I've always subscribed to is I want to get to the root cause of what's taking place here so that I can solve it. I'm not always a heroic responder. So that's where this whole idea of the holding company, and as we said, we use that term because we can relate to that term. But I think that what you're talking about with alliances is also speaking to vulnerability in our collaboration. It's like there was a time, and I think that we're seeing a difference now, but people were kind of going their own path because credit unions were larger, more competitive. And you're now talking about bringing people together to solve this member situation, and then also poverty. And now, let's look at the workaround. So let's look at efficiency so that we can help to drive that. It's a very complex business model, but it hits all the different components.
Life would be easier for us here at our credit union if we really just saw ourselves as a financial competitor to play the games that, that the financial industry allows us to play, to just play the game of margins, sell a few services here and there, try to gain more market share. And at the end of the day, if I show a positive bottom line and we've grown some and our metrics compared to our peer institutions were on the upside, and then the board pats me on the back and say, Maurice, you and your team have done a good job. And life would be simpler if we took that approach and we felt satisfied. But we don't. This can be frustrating work, Susan. It can be heartbreaking. It could be agonizing to put this burden on ourselves that we know belongs there. It's not the easy path, and it's tough work sometimes. And sometimes we get into debates in the hallway and say, okay, this is not personal, but let's fight this out. Because if we get it right, somebody sitting at their kitchen table at 9 o'clock tonight is going to have an answer to their prayers. If we get it wrong, that just means tomorrow there's a household that's going to suffer financially and sometimes socially, because the social determinants of many of our social ills sometimes start with finances. And someone's going to go through some tribulation that perhaps we could have helped them avoid. It would be easy if we didn't take it personal, but we don't know how to do that. So we're gonna have our skin in the game, our emotions in the game, our heart in the game, because our members, we believe, should demand nothing less of us.
Maurice, that's what you call leadership. You know, we look today and we want these role models, and we want people to stand up and to be these leaders that we grew up with, these icons. And the reality is how you just defined that, that it's just part of your being to want to lead and make a difference. And, you know, yes, it would be a whole lot easier, wouldn't it? But, you know, it's just there. So what are two, congratulations on that. You inspire me. What are two ideas into action that you want to say to the industry? Here's what we've got to do in 2021.
You know, I would like, this might sound a little bit scary, Susan, but I would like for the industry, number one, to accept that disruption is on the way. Maybe it's a technology, maybe it's a fancy competitor, maybe it's a change in regulations, maybe it's a social shift in how our society thinks about financial services and us. But I believe that disruption is on the way. That when an industry or company gets so complacent to believe that we've arrived and there's nothing to strive for philosophically, then that kind of hubris usually leads to a downturn. So now if we as an industry said, wait a minute, we should look over our shoulders a little bit and think disruption is on the way. How do we prepare ourselves for it? And I think the way that we prepare ourselves for it is to keep digging our heels in deeper to figure out how to serve the membership. It's all about the members, and it's all about the collective, you know, cooperative, you know, values that stitch us all together. And so that's a nugget I would like to have the movement keep present in front of mind, is that, you know, what we have today can be disrupted, and we should not become complacent. The second thing is I think one of the competitive advantages we have as a movement is our propensity for collaboration, for working together with each other. And I would like, so most of the collaboration that I've seen occur at the credit union movement occurs at an in-person conference, during the breakout periods, or during lunch period. You have a box lunch and you sit there, you talk with somebody, and there's some idea comes up and you say, oh, I hadn't heard that. And then you collaborate right in the moment. But wouldn't it be wonderful if we could find a way to scale collaboration, some kind of idea market where credit unions can go to and say, you know, we want to do a better job of serving our members in a certain way, and we can go there. I have an Apple phone, an iPhone, and when I think of a new need that I want my phone to perform, then I go to the app store and I just sort of scroll through it and I look for an app that addresses that need, and then I download it. But if you are a credit union cooperative and your community has a need, what app store do you go to say, let me talk to my colleagues in the nation and say, somebody in some credit union, in some state, in some community is doing something, saying, that's exactly the same challenge I have, and you have figured it out. How do I get my hands on the resources that you produce so I can use it for my institution? I go to lawyers' conferences and I go to bank conferences and technology conferences. Nobody collaborates freely like we do in credit unions. Nobody else does this. So how do we take this collaboration character that we have and expand upon it. I'm hoping to see that happen someday. Perhaps you, Susan, maybe you're the one to make that happen. So we'll put that pressure on you.
I'll tell you what, I just felt very inspired because the idea of an idea market, as you know, we're all about ideas into action and how does that manifest itself? And I was also thinking that one of the things for me, because I came out of an IBM company, has always been research and development. And how do we put money in a very practical, ongoing way in R&D? And you're speaking of it when you talk about innovation and when you talk about workarounds, all of some of the components that you talked about today fit into where I was thinking about R&D. And our QSOs, we've got thousands of QSOs now, and I think they're addressing individual needs, but in some cases, very much the same need, just a different organization. And where you're going with it, the idea of raw idea exchange, I think that we have the system set up, but just like anything else, it's a systemic process versus what you're talking about. I remember reading, my son's an engineer, and I remember reading an article about there were several of the large technology companies that had a pool of money made available to people that would submit ideas on solving problems. Right? And we see that in various levels throughout our credit union movement. But the collaborative part of it just makes a lot of sense. So you've made me have to noodle on something today. I'm going to go, whoa, I like that. The whole idea of it's great. So you're an amazing, amazing leader. And I know that your impact on the industry is felt in so many different areas, both as a person of color, as a person that runs a large credit union. You're inspirational to many of us, and the commitment you make of both talent and treasury to the development of issues within the, and opportunities within the credit union. This sounds optimistic, but maybe that's for you and I, but I'm optimistic. I think that we do have real challenges, and there's definitely some wake-up calls, but that's why the underground matters so much to me, so that we can have good conversations and not defensive conversations with people. We, like you said, it's constructive to have those conversations in the hallway about what you guys need to do and to arrive at that next level. So you foster that, Maurice, and I really appreciate it.
It is my pleasure and honor.